All right, so based on what I was saying, in rounding off in terms of place values, if you are one place value less than the one before, if you are one place value less than the one before, if we look at it in terms of whole number. So I'm going to use this example here to show you what is really happening. All right, so we say that this is asking us to round off $389. You round it off to the nearest $10. All right, when we look at this number, we're trying to round off to the nearest 10. So we're going into the place value of the 10th column. Everybody following so far? Now, if we want to round off to the nearest 10, then we have to look at this ones column. Because we have to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And when we reach a 9 and we get 10, we add 1 to this one. That's how it works in the decimal system. So if we look at 9, 9 is pretty close to 1, because when we say 89 and then we add 1, we'll get 90. So 389, in order to get this 8 into 9, you would have to add 10 to it. Everybody agree? It's in the 10th column. So in order to add 10 to this, then you'd have to count this now up to 10 to add 1 to this. So we say 9 is closer to 10. If 9 is closer to 10, we are going to add 1 to that place value. So because 9 is closer to 10, we add 1 to the 8, and the 8 becomes 9. Now this column, this place value, we now put a 0 as a placeholder to keep that value. Now, if we actually drop that value off, what would happen is that the number that we would have is 39, which wouldn't give you a true representative of what the actual value is. It would be telling you that you have $39 instead of $390, which is the true value. So for whole numbers, we generally replace the value that we round off. The values that fall in the whole number position that we somewhat round off. We put a 0 as a placeholder for those values. That is for whole numbers. And so any value that is greater than 5, once it follows the position that we're rounding off to, the number is greater than 5, we round up, meaning that we add 1 to the previous, to the one that we're rounding off to. But if it is less than 5, it will be closer to 0. So if it is closer to 0, we don't add anything to the 8. So that's how it works. So based on whether or not they're closer to the 10s, because 9 is closer to 10. And if you reach a 10, you add 1 to the 10th column. If it is less than 5, it is closer to 0. So 0 would be less than a whole. So we don't add anything to the 10th column in that case. We just leave it as what it was in that 10th column. So if it was, let's say, if the number instead of being 389, let's say it was now 384. What we'd actually do here, what would be the answer? Can somebody give me the answer?
Is it 380, sir?
380.
So now this 4 will be closer to 0. So when this is closer to 0, you don't get enough because remember now, you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then now you add 1 to the 10th column. This is less than 4, so it is not close to 10. It's not close to 10, so we are not going to add anything to the 8. However,
You mean 5, sir?
no, man,
You mean
it's not
close to the
closer
0?
to, it's not closer to 10. It is closer to 0.
Yes, sir.
And so the general rule is that if it is 5, it is closer to 10. And if it is more than 5, it is also closer to 10. So we take 5 and more to be closer to 10, but less than 5 to be closer to 0. And so when it is closer to 10, we add 1 to the next to the place value above. But if it is less, we don't add 1. So that's a general principle. So in this case of a whole number, we need to replace the number that we're rounding off with a 0 so as to keep that place value. So we have 3, 8, 0 in this case. So everybody should somewhat see how that works. Is there any, do you all make sense of what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
So, sir, it's always
Yes,
as
sir.
to hold the place there, sir. Whether it is for less or more.
If we always put a 0?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, in the case of a whole number, because this is a whole number. But if you have a decimal point, anything that comes after that number that you're rounding off to in the decimal point. So let's say that this is 390.75, and you want to round it off just to 1 decimal place. Then in this case now, 5 is closer to 10, so we have to add 1 to 7. Now this 5 here now, this is the time when we drop it off and it automatically don't have any meaning to us. Because whether or not you put a 0 here, it would make a difference to the answer. You follow? But in the whole number, if you drop off a 0, it will make a difference to the answer. So in other words, if you usually get $6,000 for your pay, and then they take off a 0, you're going to end up with $60, which is not that going to affect what you really, the actual value really is. You get what I'm saying? So for whole numbers, in order to not affect what the actual value is, you replace those numbers that you round up with a 0. So always replace numbers that you round up for whole numbers with zeros. Is that clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, that's a general principle of rounding off. So here we have another one, and it says round off to the nearest 10 cents. Now, it is for you to know what place value the cents are in dollars. So remember the cents falls after the points. The cent would be a fraction of a dollar. So if you're rounding off, so this first column would be the 1 cent. The second one would be the 10 cents. And so if you're rounding off to the nearest 10 cents, then you follow the same principle. Here you would now still add a 0, not because the 0 here really is really meaningful, but because we are working with what? With money. With money, we're still going to keep the place 0 as a placeholder at the end of it, right? If it was just a normal decimal number, 2.862, if it wasn't a currency, then we could just drop off the 2 and we would just have 2.86. But because it is money, we still need to put a 0 for this placeholder. Is that clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
All
Yes,
right.
sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, so we have some little rules that govern this rounding off principle. So we say when a number is exactly midway between the limits, we round to the limit above. That is, if the number that follows the unit which we round to is greater than or equal to 5, we add 1 to the unit. But if it is if less than 5, the unit value remains the same. So that's the same rule that we have been discussing so far. All right, here we have another one. 135 rounded to the nearest tenth. So we look for the 10th column. So that is important. So the general procedure, you look for the column that you're rounding off to. Then you examine the number that comes after to see whether or not it is 5 or more, or if it is less than 5. Now, if it is 5 or more, you know you're going to add 1 to the number you're rounding off to. So in this case, we add 1 to the 3, we get 4. Now, this is a whole number plus it's money. So when we replace the 5 now with a 0 after we round up to 4. All right, so that is pretty much what we have been doing so far. All right, so values can be rounded off to give numbers of significant figures or decimal places. So if we are thinking in terms of number of decimal places or number of significant figures, then we will consider rounding off based on how many decimal places we want or how many significant figures we want. So now I would like to find out from you guys, anybody who can tell me the difference between significant figures and decimal places. Anybody? All right. Miss Clark, any idea?
Sir, I'm not sure, sir. I'm thinking that maybe significant figures are like whole numbers.
Significant figures are like whole numbers. All right. Anybody else would like to share? What about you, Mr. Campbell?
You said the difference between significant figures and rounding off, sir.
Or difference between significant figures and decimal places.
Oh, significant figures. Wow. Yeah. No, sir.
What about you, Mr. Giovanni?
Is it the numbers that comes after the decimal point, sir?
What you're saying now, Miss Green?
Nothing, sir.
No, man, you express yourself. That's
Is
your
it that comes after the decimal point?
Is it the number that comes after the decimal point? What exactly you're saying?
Never mind, sir.
What about the numbers that come after the decimal point?
So we have to look at the digit value.
All right, what the digit value is saying to you? One of them actually is self-explanatory, you know.
Sir,
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Wilson.
all right. As Miss Green was saying, the numbers behind the decimal point, those would have been so those would have been the decimal places, numbers falling behind the point, they hold the place value of in the tens position where tens, hundreds, or thousands, right?
All right, so
For me,
the
the
number,
significant figures.
pick up in the Miss Wilson. All right, go ahead, and then I'll.
Right. So I would look at the significant figures, sir. Would have been like, see how you have the 135 and then you round off. So those would have been the significant figures behind the decimal point that can actually contribute to our next value. Those have been the significant numbers.
Okay. All right. So I'm with you in regards to the decimal places, but I'm not, it's a little bit still shady when you're talking about the significant figures, which I'll clarify for you. Now, for decimal places, it's pretty much the amount of numbers that come after the point that determine the number of decimal places.
Sir, something like that, but that's
Right, so the amount of numbers that come after the point tells you the number of decimal places. So if you have 1 digit after the point, then you have 1 decimal place, 2 digits after the point, 2 decimal place, 3, and so on. That tells you the number of decimal places, right? So when we're talking about decimal places, if you're rounding off and they say round off to 2 decimal places, you count 2 digits after the point and you round off to that second digit. If they say round off to 3 decimal places, you count 3 digits after the point and round off to the third digit. All right, so that's decimal place.
so, sir. Does that
Yes.
mean significant figures are the numbers that are before the decimal point?
No, not necessarily.
Really?
So anybody knows what the word significant means?
So it has a meaning.
Huh? Go ahead.
It has a meaning, sir, a special meaning.
What is the meaning? What is the special?
Important.
Oh, so when it is significant, the thing has a special meaning. That's what you're saying. That's what you're saying, Miss Bell?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, all right. I wouldn't say it has a special meaning, but what I would instead say is that it is meaningful. When something is significant, it means it is meaningful. You follow what I'm saying, Miss Belmont?
Yes, sir.
Right. Now, when we talk about significant figures and when we're rounding off, we're asking which figures are more meaningful to your answer. That's what we're really asking. You know. What are the figures that are more meaningful to your answer? Now, when you think about that, what are the numbers that would come to your mind that are meaningful?
sir, you're referring to this in the case of rounding off, right?
Well, yeah, it has relation with rounding off too as well.
Okay.
Because significant figures, you know, when we say round off to a certain number of significant figures, it is
Mhm.
when you round off to decimal places. So when we talk about decimal places, we are only talking about the digits, the number of digits that we round off after the point. But when we're talking about significant figures, we're really talking about all the values that are in, all the figures that are in the values that is meaningful to your answer. So now, instead of just counting only the decimal places in your answer, you're counting all the numbers from beginning to the where you round off. Is that clear, guys? So for instance, suppose you have 3.56, and I ask you, how many significant figures is that? How many significance is that, students?
3.
3, sir.
3, because all of these numbers are what? Are meaningful to your answer. Now, if you want now to say round off to 2 significant figures, then what would be the answer?
3.6.
3.6.
3.6, right? So now you would include the numbers from the left to all that you have from left to right. So you include all the numbers from left to right. Now, significant figure, however, can be a little tricky when it comes on to numbers like this, 0.0345. How many significant figures are there now?
Three, sir.
Why you said 3, Ms. Wesa?
Sir, because the 0.
Sir, I'm gonna see where the 0 didn't hold any value really. That's that
Yeah.
0 hole and then the 0 in front of the decimal point. It doesn't hold any value much.
All
To
right.
carry over to the whole.
So how would you define significant figures now? How do you count your significant figures?
Numbers after the 0.
All right, so you start counting from the first non-zero digits
Yes, sir.
from the right. That's how you determine your significant figures. Now, a whole number where you have non-zero digits, it is pretty okay. You just count all of them. But in this where you have zeros in front, the digits, where these zeros may not have any meaning to the answer in terms of significant figures, then you wouldn't count the zeros in the front. All right, guys, is that everybody clear on that?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. All right, now, so as you notice, I am going over the 8 o'clock, so I'm trying to make up back for some time that you would have lost from. So I'm just going up until 8:30. All right, so here now, decimal places, we would be familiar with what that is. So it is, anybody can remind me what decimal places, how do we determine decimal place? Our places.
Numbers that falls behind the point, sir.
I don't want you to say numbers that fall behind the points.
digits.
No, I don't want you to say that either. I want you to say the decimal places are determined by how many numbers fall behind the point. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Right. So the number of decimal places are the number of digits after the point tells you the number of decimal places. All right. So with that said, you should be able to determine what to do when they ask you to round off decimal places and what to do when they ask you to round off significant figures. So oftentimes students mix up the two. Now decimal places, it is a number of figures which follows the point that give the number of decimal places. In other words, if to find two decimal places, we count two figures, two numbers after the decimal point in the decimal. All right, here we have some examples of rounding off to in terms of decimal places. So I figured that everybody should be able to round off these correctly because everybody knows the rule for rounding off. So what I want you to do for me, this number, which is 85.7684, you're going to round it off to one decimal place. Then again, you're going to round off to two decimal places, then three decimal places. That means you should round it off 3 different times. So the first one would be 1 decimal place, second one 2 decimal places, and the third one 3 decimal places. So now, can anybody supply me with what's the value when you round off to 1 decimal place?
85.8, sir.
All right, and so let me see the hands of those who are in agreement with that. All right, so everybody is in agreement with that, which is pretty pretty straightforward and correct. All right, now I want to hear from someone else, not from Ms. Wilson. What is the value when you round off to 2 decimal places?
85.
So is it
0.
12?
All right, Ms. Green, you were saying, let me hear what you are saying.
85.80.
All right, let me see what Ms. Green is saying. She says 85.80.
Yes,
Sir,
sir.
Anybody else would like to try?
Yes, sir. I agree with what Paisley said in the chat, 85.87.
85.8 what?
7.
87. Anybody else would like to try?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
85.77.
Yes, sir. That's what I got.
Yes, sir.
because I
Yeah,
didn't-
yes, sir.
I did
All
because I
right.
didn't. I got that as well, sir.
Okay. All right. So so when we're actually rounding off, you see what I think confuse the first two person is that when we round off to 1 decimal place, we get 85.8. Now, when you're rounding off, you're not concerned about if you round it off to 1 before. You're ignoring this value altogether and you go back to this. Your focus should be first, you count the digits that come after the point. So you want 2 decimal places. So you count 2 digits after the point. So this is 1 and this is 2. Now, once you do that, you're now only concerned about rounding off to this digit. Now, the 7 doesn't have anything to do with it. So this 7 doesn't have anything to do with the rounding off. So it has to remain where it is. The one that we concern about is the second decimal place is this. So rounding off to the 6. So the number that will affect rounding off to the second decimal place is the number that follows the second decimal place. If that number is greater than or equal to 5, we add 1 to the 6. But if it is less than 5, we leave the 6 as it is and then drop off the rest of the values. So clearly then, our answer to this one would be, for the second decimal place, would be 85.77. All right, Miss, was it Miss Green and Miss Shea? Do you understand what happened just now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, so what about the next one though? 3 decimal places. Let me ask Miss Green, what is the answer?
$85.7.
Let me ask Miss Shea to give me her answer as well. Miss Shea,
6.8, sir.
Yes, sir.
what is the answer to rounding off this to 3 decimal places? What's the answer you get?
85.7.
I would say 85.78. Oh, but it's 3 decimal places.
3 decimal places.
0, sir.
Sir,
Remember, give me a second, let me clarify this. Remember, you first count the decimal places and when you reach the third one, then you round off. Try that again for me, Miss Shea.
Okay, sir.
What you get now?
Sir, this time I got 85.88.
All right, you're doing something wrong. What is it that you're doing wrong, Miss Shea? Let me see if you can identify what your error is.
Sir, I think that
All right, let me say something to you. Yes, what was the answer you give me? 85.88. 0.88. And we are saying that you have to round it off to how many decimal places?
3, sir.
3. But even if you have 88 here, how many digits come after the point here?
3.
How many digits right here?
no, sir.
2.
2 in
Right.
2.
So you're still not at 3. And another problem is that you're looking at each of these numbers. So you're saying the 6 follow the 7, so you add 1 to the 7. Now you look and you say, The 8 follow the 6, so you add 1 to the 8. You're not supposed to be doing that because it is only the number at the place that you're asked to round off to. That is the only number that you're looking at, which you're going to either add 1 to or leave it the same. So these numbers that come before, you're not doing anything at all to them. You follow what I'm saying, Michelle?
Yes, sir.
So what should you have here now? Explain to me what you think your answer should be.
Sir, if based on what you just said, sir, I am thinking my answer would be 85.8.
You're still changing the 7.
Sir,
You're not supposed to change the 7.
sir.
Why you're not changing the 7? Because you're not rounding off to 7. You're not rounding off to 1 decimal place. How many
Sir, may I answer?
Hold on, Mr. Giovanni. I'm trying to just clear up the idea in Miss Shea's mind, what she's supposed to be doing. All right, Miss Shea, when we
Yes, sir.
the 3 decimal places, before you're doing any kind of change of number, any kind of adding or subtracting of number, the first thing that you do, you count 3 digits after the point. So when you count 3 digits after the point in this number, where you end up, which number you end up at?
8.
You end up at the 8. Now, the 7 and the 6, you're not doing anything at all to them. They have to remain as they are. The only number that you will change would be the 8. If the number that follows is greater than 5, what would you do now?
Sir, I would add 1, but it's not greater than 5, so I would let it remain the same.
Right, so now what you do now, because this is less than 5, you're going to just drop off this 4 and keep this number as is. So what